Scott Wright stood frozen as the towering Ocampa warrior's iridescent skin brushed against his arm. In that moment, he became the first human male to dare close contact with the beautiful yet deadly race. The assembled Ocampa gasped, weapons drawn in an instant. Tension crackled through the air of Ocampa Prime's spaceport. Scott's heart raced, but he held his ground, maintaining eye contact with Altair, the imposing lead negotiator who now studied him with unexpected curiosity. Earth's fate hung in the balance. An aggressive alien empire threatened humanity's very existence, and only the Ocampa's advanced military technology could save them. This diplomatic mission was their last hope, and Scott had just violated the warrior race's strict no-contact policy. The human delegation leader scrambled to apologize, but Scott remained still, acutely aware of the elaborately tattooed and cybernetically enhanced Ocampa surrounding them. Their energy weapons and impenetrable armor spoke volumes about why Earth so desperately sought their aid. Altair towered over Scott, her muscular frame and battle scars a testament to the Ocampa's martial prowess. Her piercing eyes bore into him, searching for fear or disrespect. She found neither. "You dare touch an Ocampa warrior?" Altair's voice carried both threat and intrigue. Scott swallowed hard. "It was unintentional, but I won't apologize for an accident. I'm here to build bridges, not cower in fear." A murmur rippled through the Ocampa ranks. No alien had ever spoken to them with such boldness. Altair's lips curled into the barest hint of a smile. "Intriguing. You will be watched closely, human." As the delegation was escorted to their quarters, Scott absorbed every detail of the alien world around him. The capital city's architecture was a marvel of defensive design, with towering spires and impregnable fortifications that spoke to centuries of conflict. He learned the tragic history behind the Ocampa's aversion to physical contact. A touch-transmitted bioweapon from another alien race had nearly annihilated their species. This knowledge added layers of complexity to the diplomatic challenge ahead, and to Scott's growing fascination with Altair. The human diplomat understood the monumental task before him. He had to forge a connection with a xenophobic warrior race, starting with their most decorated and intimidating representative. The fate of Earth depended on his ability to bridge the vast gulf between their species. As night fell on Ocampa Prime, Scott stared out the window of his quarters, watching the planet's twin moons rise over the alien landscape. He flexed his fingers, still tingling from that momentary contact with Altair's skin. Against all odds, a spark had ignited between them. Now, Scott had to fan that spark into a flame strong enough to forge an alliance, and perhaps something more. The human male who dared to get close to the beautiful warrior race knew that tomorrow the real challenge would begin. As the twin moons of Ocampa Prime cast their ethereal glow over the alien landscape, Scott Wright's mind raced with possibilities. The tingling sensation in his fingers served as a constant reminder of the momentous event that had transpired mere hours ago. Little did he know that his accidental touch would set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the future of both humanity and the Ocampa. The following morning, Scott was abruptly awakened by a stern-faced Ocampa guard. "The High Council demands your presence," the guard announced, his tone brooking no argument. As Scott hurriedly dressed, he noticed Altair waiting outside his quarters, her expression unreadable. "What's going on?" Scott asked, falling into step beside her as they were escorted through the labyrinthine corridors of the Ocampa Citadel. Altair's eyes flickered to him briefly. "The Council wishes to discuss yesterday's incident." The Council chamber was a vast circular room, its high ceiling adorned with holographic representations of Ocampa's military victories. Scott found himself standing before a semicircle of imposing Ocampa elders, their cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the low light. The interrogation began without preamble. For hours, Scott fielded questions about his intentions, his understanding of Ocampa culture, and the threat humanity faced. He answered with honesty and respect, acutely aware of the weight his words carried. As the questioning progressed, an elder with intricate facial tattoos leaned forward. "Human, do you understand why we avoid physical contact with outsiders?" Scott hesitated, sensing the importance of his answer. "I know it's crucial to your culture, but I don't fully understand why." The elder's eyes narrowed. Centuries ago, our people were nearly eradicated by a touch-transmitted bioweapon. Millions perished before we developed a cure. The revelation hit Scott like a physical blow. Suddenly, the Ocampa's aversion to touch took on a new, tragic dimension. He looked at Altair, seeing her stoic expression in a new light. I had no idea, Scott said, his voice thick with emotion. The loss you've suffered is unimaginable. I give you my word that humanity seeks only friendship and mutual protection, never to cause harm. His sincerity seemed to resonate with the council. After a lengthy deliberation, they announced their decision. The human delegation could remain on Ocampa Prime, but under strict conditions. Scott was designated as the primary liaison, tasked with working alongside Altair to navigate the complex path toward potential alliance. Over the following weeks, Scott immersed himself in his new role. He spent countless hours with Altair, poring over cultural texts, strategic simulations, and diplomatic protocols. Despite the physical barrier between them, a deep connection began to form. One evening, as they reviewed data on Xeraxian fleet movements, Scott noticed Altair's troubled expression. "What's wrong?" he asked. Altair's cybernetic eye whirred as she focused on him. "Your evidence of Xeraxian aggression is compelling, but many of my people remain unconvinced. They fear involvement in galactic conflicts will only bring destruction to our doorstep." Scott nodded, understanding the dilemma. "We need to find a way to show them that isolation won't protect them forever. The Xeraxians won't stop with Earth." As they continued to work together, Scott found himself increasingly drawn to Altair's strength, intelligence, and dedication. He admired the grace with which she moved, the sharp wit behind her tactical suggestions, and the rare moments when her stoic facade softened into something almost like a smile. For her part, Altair found Scott's adaptability and quick thinking impressive. His genuine interest in Ocampa culture and his tireless efforts to bridge their differences did not go unnoticed. Their breakthrough came during a late-night strategy session. Scott, bleary-eyed from hours of analyzing defense schematics, suddenly sat up straight. "What if we could create a force field that allows safe physical contact between species?" Altair's eyes widened. "A protective barrier that would alleviate our bioweapon concerns while allowing closer interaction." Scott nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. It could be the first step toward real trust between our peoples." The idea sent shockwaves through Ocampa society. The High Council, intrigued by the potential, authorized a joint human Ocampa research team to explore the concept. Scott threw himself into the project, working alongside brilliant Ocampa scientists to merge human ingenuity with Ocampa's advanced technology. As work on the force field progressed, Scott became aware of growing opposition within the Ocampa military. General Krell, a decorated war hero with a deep distrust of outsiders, began openly questioning the wisdom of collaborating with humans. Scott overheard snippets of conversation in the research facility's corridors. "The humans' influence grows too strong," one Ocampa scientist muttered. "General Krell says we risk another bioweapon catastrophe if we let down our guard." Realizing the precariousness of their position, Scott redoubled his efforts on the force field project. He knew that its success could mean the difference between alliance and rejection. Weeks of tireless work culminated in the first test of the force field prototype. The research team gathered in a specially prepared laboratory, tension thick in the air. Scott stood beside Altair, acutely aware of the mere inches separating them. As the force field generator hummed to life, a sudden power surge caused sparks to erupt from a nearby console. Without thinking, Scott lunged forward, pushing Altair out of harm's way. In that instant, the force field snapped into place around them, creating a shimmering barrier between their bodies. Time seemed to stand still as Scott and Altair found themselves in unprecedented proximity, the force field allowing them to experience the sensation of touch without actual contact. The moment was electric, filled with possibility and fraught with cultural implications. The lab erupted into chaos. Some scientists cheered at the successful activation, while others recoiled in shock at the sight of human and Ocampa in such close contact. Alarms blared as security personnel rushed into the room, weapons drawn. As Scott and Altair were quickly separated, he caught her eye. In that brief glance, he saw a mix of wonder, fear, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Whatever it was, he knew that everything had changed. News of the force field incident spread like wildfire through Ocampa Prime. The population was sharply divided, with many hailing it as a historic breakthrough, while others, led by General Krell, denounced it as a dangerous violation of their most sacred laws. In the midst of the growing controversy, Scott received an urgent transmission from Earth. The message chilled him to his core. The Zyraxian fleet had been detected at the edge of the solar system, advancing far more rapidly than anyone had anticipated. As he processed the dire news, Scott realized that the fate of two worlds now rested on his shoulders. With time running out and opposition mounting, he knew he had to find a way to unite humans and Ocampa before it was too late. The real challenge was only beginning. The force field incident had ignited a powder keg of tension within Ocampa society, and the explosion was imminent. General Krell, a towering figure with cybernetic enhancements that gleamed menacingly in the low light, seized upon the chaos. His booming voice echoed through the corridors of the Ocampa High Council chambers as he declared martial law. "For the safety and security of our people, I am assuming control," Krell announced, his cybernetic eye scanning the room for any sign of dissent. "The human delegation and their Ocampa collaborators have endangered us all with their reckless experiments." Before Scott could fully process what was happening, he found himself surrounded by Krell's loyalists. Altair, standing nearby, tensed for a fight, but Scott caught her eye and shook his head slightly. They were outnumbered and outgunned. "Take them to the detention center," Krell ordered, his voice cold with contempt. As Scott was roughly escorted through the winding corridors of the Ocampa Citadel, he caught glimpses of the turmoil unfolding around him. Civilians huddled in corners, whispering frantically. Military personnel marched in formation, their weapons at the ready. The detention center was a stark utilitarian facility deep within the heart of the Citadel. Scott was unceremoniously shoved into a small cell, its walls humming with energy fields designed to prevent escape. Through a small window, he could see Altair being led to a separate cell block. Hours passed like days as Scott paced his cell, his mind racing. Earth needed Ocampa's help, but now they were cut off from all communication. The weight of two worlds pressed down upon him, threatening to crush his spirit. A faint whisper caught his attention. "Scott, can you hear me?" He pressed his ear to the wall, recognizing Altair's voice. "I'm here. Are you all right?" "I'm unharmed," she replied, her voice barely audible through the ventilation system. "We need to get out of here. Krell's actions are illegal, and many Ocampans will oppose him once they learn the truth." Over the next few hours, Scott and Altair formulated an escape plan, their whispered conversations a lifeline in the oppressive silence of the detention center. Altair's knowledge of Ocampa security systems proved invaluable, while Scott contributed his human perspective on exploiting potential weaknesses. As they plotted, Altair revealed more about herself and the changing attitudes among younger Ocampans. "Many of us have grown weary of our isolation," she confided. "Your arrival, your willingness to understand us, it sparked something in our people, a desire for connection." Their chance came during a shift change. Scott had noticed a pattern in the guard rotations, and Altair identified a brief window where the energy fields would fluctuate. As the familiar hum of the fields wavered, Scott pressed his hand against the cell door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a spark of electricity, the field collapsed. Scott burst into the corridor, quickly locating the control panel Altair had described. His fingers flew over the alien interface, guided by Altair's instructions. Moments later, her cell door slid open. They moved swiftly through the detention center, dodging patrols and using Altair's access codes to bypass security checkpoints. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with two guards. Without hesitation, Scott dropped into a fighting stance. The guards, caught off guard by the human's unexpected combat readiness, hesitated for a crucial second. Scott seized the opportunity, his fist connecting with the first guard's jaw in a powerful uppercut. Altair moved with liquid grace, disarming the second guard with a series of lightning-fast strikes. To their surprise, one of the subdued guards looked up at them with a mix of fear and hope. "Are you part of the resistance?" he whispered. Altair's eyes widened. "There's active resistance against Krell?" The guard nodded. "Many of us disagree with his actions. We've been waiting for a chance to act." With unexpected allies, Scott and Altair made their way out of the detention center. They emerged into the neon-lit streets of the Ocampa capital, now eerily quiet under martial law. Hovering patrol vehicles cast searching beams of light across the empty boulevards. Their new ally directed them to a safe house where they met Zara, Altair's younger sister. The family resemblance was clear, but where Altair was all warrior grace, Zara hummed with nearly unleashed intellectual energy. "We've been working to recreate your force field technology," Zara explained, leading them to a makeshift lab hidden in the basement. "Many of us believe it's the key to our future." Over the next few days, Scott worked tirelessly alongside Zara and a team of brilliant Ocampa scientists. They labored in secret, always aware of the patrols passing overhead. Scott's understanding of the original prototype proved crucial, allowing them to make rapid progress. As they worked, Scott found himself at the center of a growing movement. His diplomatic skills, honed through years of interstellar negotiations, helped bridge divides between various Ocampa factions. Conservative elders, initially skeptical, were won over by Scott's respectful approach and genuine desire to understand their concerns. The resistance grew, bolstered by Krell's increasingly draconian measures. Public gatherings were banned, and anyone suspected of opposing the new regime disappeared into detention centers. But with every act of oppression, more Ocampans turned against Krell. Finally, after countless sleepless nights and near misses with Krell's patrols, they were ready to test the new force field prototype. The resistance gathered in an abandoned warehouse, converted into a makeshift laboratory. The air crackled with tension and hope. Scott stepped forward. "I'll be the test subject," he announced, his voice steady despite the risk. Altair grabbed his arm, her touch electric even through the fabric of his sleeve. "Scott, it's too dangerous. We don't know if it will work." He met her gaze, seeing the concern in her eyes. "It has to be me. I'm the only human here, and we need to prove it's safe for interspecies contact." As Scott positioned himself in the center of the room, Zara initiated the force field generator. A low hum filled the air, building to a crescendo. Then, with a flash of light, a shimmering bubble enveloped Scott. Altair approached cautiously, her hand outstretched. As her fingers made contact with the force field, there was a collective gasp. Instead of the expected barrier, her hand passed through, allowing her to grasp Scott's hand. For a moment, everything else faded away. Scott marveled at the warmth of Altair's skin, the first direct contact he'd had with an Ocampa. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the potential for true connection between their species became tangible reality. The successful test galvanized the resistance. Word spread rapidly through hidden networks, capturing the imagination of Ocampans who had long accepted isolation as the price of safety. The force field represented hope for a future where connection didn't mean vulnerability. As public opinion shifted, cracks began to show in Krell's regime. More soldiers and officials defected to the resistance, bringing with them crucial intelligence. But even as hope grew on Ocampa Prime, a shadow loomed over Earth. Scott received a coded transmission from the human delegation, still under house arrest. The message was brief, but chilling. Zyraxian ships had been detected entering the solar system. Scott looked out over the glittering expanse of the Ocampa capital, his heart heavy with the knowledge that Earth's fate hung in the balance. He turned to Altair and Zara, their faces illuminated by the glow of the force field prototype. "We're out of time," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to take back control and mobilize Ocampa's defenses. Earth can't stand alone against the Zyraxians." Altair nodded, her warrior spirit rising to the challenge. "Then we fight, for Earth, for Ocampa, and for a future where our peoples stand together." As they began to plan their assault on Krell's headquarters, Scott knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of two worlds. The force field hummed softly in the background, a reminder of what they were fighting for, a future of connection, understanding, and shared strength in the face of galactic threats. Scott turned to face the small group of resistance leaders gathered in the dimly lit safe house. The air was thick with tension and the faint hum of the force field prototype. "We have the technology, we have the support, but we're running out of time," Scott said, his voice low but intense. "We need to act now if we're going to save both our worlds." Altair stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with determination. "I agree, but how do we take on Krell's entire regime?" Zara, who had been poring over a holographic display of the capital city, suddenly looked up. "The communications hub," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If we can broadcast the truth to all of Ocampa Prime." Scott's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. "We could turn the entire population against Krell in one fell swoop." The next hours were a flurry of activity as they formulated their plan. Scott watched in amazement as the resistance movement mobilized with incredible efficiency. Ocampans from all walks of life volunteered for various roles, from creating diversions to providing logistical support. As dawn broke over the capital city, the resistance put their plan into motion. Protests erupted simultaneously at military installations across the planet, drawing Krell's forces away from the communications hub. Scott, leading a small infiltration team, crouched in the shadow of a towering skyscraper near their target. "Remember," he whispered to Altair and Zara, who flanked him on either side, "we're aiming for stealth as long as possible. Use your force fields only as a last resort. We don't want to tip our hand too early." They moved swiftly through the streets, using a combination of back alleys and maintenance tunnels to avoid detection. Scott's heart raced as they approached the imposing structure of the communications hub. Its sleek, crystalline architecture belied the heavily fortified interior. As they reached the outer perimeter, Scott signaled for a halt. He pulled out a small device Zara had engineered, a hybrid of human and Ocampa technology designed to interfere with the hub's security systems. With a deep breath, he activated it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then with a soft whir, the security barrier flickered and died. Scott nodded to his team, and they darted forward into the complex. Inside, they encountered their first real resistance. A squad of Krell's loyalists, caught off guard by the security breach, moved to intercept them. Scott dropped into a fighting stance, his body tense and ready. The first guard charged at him, cybernetic enhancements gleaming. Scott sidestepped at the last moment, using the guard's momentum against him. In a fluid motion, he grappled the much larger Ocampan and flipped him over his shoulder. The guard crashed into a control panel, sparks flying. Beside him, Altair moved with lethal grace. Her combat style was a blur of precise strikes and acrobatic maneuvers that left her opponents reeling. Zara, though less martially inclined, used her technical skills to great effect, hacking into nearby systems to create chaos and confusion. As they fought their way deeper into the complex, Scott couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at how seamlessly their different styles complemented each other. Human adaptability and resourcefulness merged with Ocampan's strength and technology to create something truly formidable. They were nearing the main control room when a deep, booming voice stopped them in their tracks. "Enough of this foolishness!" General Krell himself stood before them, flanked by his elite guard. His cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Scott, its red glow ominous in the dim light. "You risk everything for what?" Krell sneered. "To weaken us? To make us vulnerable?" Scott took a step forward, his hands open in a gesture of peace. "No, General. To save us all. The Zeraxians are coming, and Earth can't stand against them alone. We need each other." Krell's organic eye narrowed. "And why should we believe you?" "Because the evidence is irrefutable," Scott replied, his voice steady. "We have the data, the transmissions from Earth. But more than that, we have proof that our peoples can work together, can even touch without harm." He gestured to the force field generator at his belt. "We're stronger together, General. Isn't your duty to protect your people? This is how we do that." For a moment, Krell seemed to waver. Then, to everyone's shock, one of his guards stepped forward. "He's right, sir," the guard said, removing his helmet. "I've seen the evidence. We can't ignore this threat." A ripple went through the assembled Ocampans. More guards lowered their weapons, looking uncertainly between Krell and Scott. The general's face contorted with rage and disbelief. In the moment of confusion, Scott locked eyes with Altair. They moved as one, pushing past the distracted guards and into the control room. Zara was right behind them, her fingers flying over the alien console. "We're live," she announced, her voice tight with excitement, "broadcasting to all of Ocampa Prime." Scott stepped up to the transmitter, his heart pounding. This was the moment that would determine the fate of two worlds. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "People of Ocampa Prime, I come to you with urgent news and a plea for unity." As Scott's words echoed across the planet, backed by irrefutable evidence of both the force field's success and the Zyraxian threat, the tide began to turn. Reports flooded in of mass defections within the military, of citizens taking to the streets in support of the resistance. Within hours, Krell's regime had crumbled. The High Council, quickly reinstated, convened an emergency session to address the crisis. Scott and Altair stood before them, presenting their plan for an Ocampa human alliance. The debate was intense, with centuries of isolationist policy butting up against the urgent need for action. Scott watched, his heart in his throat, as the council members argued back and forth. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they called for a vote. The decision was unanimous. Ocampa would stand with Earth against the Zyraxians. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. Scott found himself at the heart of a massive military mobilization, working alongside Ocampa strategists to integrate human and Ocampa tactics. He introduced concepts of guerrilla warfare and asymmetric engagement, which fascinated the Ocampans and perfectly complemented their advanced technology. Altair, now Supreme Commander of the Ocampa fleet, threw herself into preparations for the coming battle. She oversaw joint training exercises, pushing both human and Ocampa forces to their limits. The once empty streets of the capital now buzzed with activity as warriors from both species trained side by side. The force field technology, rapidly adapted for military use, became a game changer. Personal shields for ground troops and reinforced spacecraft hulls promised to give them a crucial edge against the unsuspecting Zyraxians. As the day of departure drew near, Scott stood on a balcony overlooking the launch bay. Thousands of Ocampa warships, their hulls now bearing the insignia of both species, stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a breathtaking sight, a physical manifestation of what their peoples could accomplish together. He felt a presence beside him and turned to see Altair. Without a word, she activated her personal force field. Scott did the same, and for the first time, they embraced without barriers. The sensation was electric, a perfect blend of the familiar and the alien. "Whatever happens," Altair said softly, "we face it together." Scott nodded, words failing him in the face of the moment's significance. As they stood there, the first ships began to rise, their engines painting the sky with blue fire. The Ocampa human armada was launching, racing to meet the Zyraxian threat head-on. As Scott watched the ships disappear into the upper atmosphere, he knew that this was only the beginning. The real test still lay ahead, waiting for them in the cold vastness of space. Space. The journey to Earth took mere hours with Ocampa's advanced propulsion technology. As they dropped out of hyperspace, the vast expanse of the Sol system sprawled before them. Scott's breath caught in his throat at the sight of his homeworld, a blue marble suspended in the void. But the moment of awe was short-lived. The scene that greeted them was one of chaos and devastation. Earth's orbital defenses lay in ruins, chunks of debris and disabled ships drifting aimlessly. The Zyraxian invasion fleet loomed large, their massive ships dwarfing Earth's remaining forces. "Status report," Altair commanded, her voice sharp with urgency. A young Ocampa officer responded, his fingers dancing over a holographic display. "Multiple Earth colonies under attack. Mars outpost has gone dark. Lunar base reporting heavy casualties." Scott's lips pursed. He turned to Altair, who nodded grimly. "Open a channel to Earth Command," she ordered. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the haggard face of Admiral Chen. Relief washed over her features as she recognized Scott. "Right, thank God you're here. We're barely holding on." Scott leaned forward. "Admiral, we've brought help. What's the situation?" As Chen briefed them on Earth's desperate straits, Scott's mind raced, piecing together a strategy. When she finished, he turned to Altair. We need to hit them hard and fast. Use our technological edge while we have it. Altair nodded, a predatory gleam in her eye. Agreed. All ships, prepare for engagement. Activate force field enhancements. The Ocampa human armada surged forward, their ships glowing with an ethereal blue light as the force field snapped into place. They plowed into the Zyraxian lines, energy weapons splashing harmlessly against their shields. Scott watched in awe as the battle unfolded. Ocampa capital ships traded blows with Zyraxian dreadnoughts, while human fighters darted between them, striking at vulnerable points with surgical precision. It's working, he breathed, watching a Zyraxian cruiser erupt into flames. But the tide of battle shifted abruptly. A strange ripple passed through space, and suddenly, Scott felt his stomach lurch. Warning klaxons blared across the bridge. "Gravitational anomaly detected," an officer shouted. "It's crushing our outer squadrons." Scott watched in horror as Allied ships crumpled like tin cans, crushed by an invisible force. Altair's face was grim as she ordered a tactical retreat. As they regrouped, Scott's mind raced. "We need to take out that gravity weapon," he said, turning to Altair. "A small team, a stealth approach. We could—" "I'll lead it myself," Altair interrupted, her eyes blazing with grit. Scott shook his head. "Not without me, you won't." In the shuttle bay, they assembled their strike team, a mix of Ocampa special forces and human commandos. Scott checked his personal force field generator one last time as they boarded the stealth shuttle. The journey to the Zyraxian flagship was tense, silent. They slipped past the ongoing battle, the shuttle's advanced cloaking technology rendering them invisible to sensors and eyes alike. Docking with the alien vessel was a delicate operation, but they managed it without detection. As the airlock cycled, Scott looked at Altair. No words were needed. Their eyes met, conveying a wealth of emotion and dedication. They burst onto the Zyraxian ship, force fields shimmering. The alien corridors were a maze of biomechanical architecture, pulsing with an eerie organic light. They encountered resistance almost immediately. Zyraxian warriors, towering insectoid creatures, swarmed towards them. Scott ducked under a swipe from a razor-sharp limb, his force field flaring as it deflected the blow. He retaliated with a series of quick jabs, exploiting gaps in the alien's carapace. Beside him, Altair was a whirlwind of motion. Her Ocampa strength, amplified by the force field, sent Zyraxians flying. The rest of the team fought with equal ferocity, human adaptability blending seamlessly with Ocampa power. They fought their way deeper into the ship, following the increasing gravitational distortions. Finally, they reached a massive door, pulsing with energy. "This is it," Scott said, breathing heavily. "The control room." Altair nodded, signaling the team to take up positions. With a burst of combined firepower, they breached the door. The scene that greeted them was like something out of a nightmare. At the center of the cavernous chamber stood a being that could only be the Zyraxian Supreme Commander. Krax towered over them, his multiple limbs manipulating complex controls. "Intruders!" Krax's voice boomed, reverberating through their bodies. "You dare invade my ship?" Altair stepped forward, her weapon raised. "Surrender, Krax. Your invasion has failed." Krax's response was a deafening roar. He lunged forward with shocking speed, his limbs a blur of motion. Altair met his charge head-on, her force field flaring brilliantly as she grappled with the massive alien. Scott circled the fight, looking for an opening. He remembered the intelligence reports on Zyraxian physiology, searching for a weakness. There, a gap in the exoskeleton where multiple limbs joined the torso. "Altair," he shouted, "the joint where the arms meet the body." She understood immediately. As Krax reared back for another attack, Altair dropped low and struck. Her fist, enhanced by the force field, punched through the weak spot in Krax's armor. The Zyraxian Supreme Commander let out a shriek of pain and surprise. He staggered back, off balance. Scott saw their chance. "Now!" he yelled. In perfect synchronization, Scott and Altair launched a final assault. Their combined attack drove Krax to his knees. With a deft move, Altair pinned the alien leader's arms behind him. "It's over," Scott said, his voice firm. With Krax subdued and the gravity weapon disabled, they relayed the news to the fleet. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Zyraxian ships began to break formation, some retreating, others signaling their surrender. As they made their way back to the flagship with their prisoner, Scott's mind was already racing ahead. The challenges they faced now were perhaps even more complex than the battle they'd just won. Back on Altair's ship, they watched as the remnants of the Zyraxian fleet were rounded up. Earth, battered but unbroken, shone blue and beautiful on the console. Scott turned to Altair, a mixture of emotions playing across his face. "We did it," he said softly. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "We did, but this is just the beginning, isn't it?" As if in answer, a communication officer called out, "Supreme Commander, we're receiving transmissions from multiple non-aligned worlds. They're requesting diplomatic talks." Scott and Altair shared a look. The galaxy was changing, and they were at the heart of it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Together, as allies and partners. In the weeks following the Zyraxian defeat, Scott found himself thrust into a whirlwind of diplomatic activity. The once empty conference rooms of the Ocampa flagship now buzzed with representatives from dozens of worlds, all eager to align themselves with the victorious Human Ocampa Alliance. Scott rubbed his temples, fighting off a headache as he reviewed the latest batch of diplomatic requests. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. "Enter," he called out. Altair strode in, her face etched with concern. "We have a situation," she said without preamble. "A Zyraxian transport ship is requesting permission to dock. They claim to be refugees seeking asylum." Scott's eyebrows shot up. "Refugees? That's unexpected." "Indeed," Altair replied, her voice tight. "Many of our people are already voicing their objections. They don't trust the Zyraxians, even if they claim to be defectors." Scott stood pacing the room as he considered the implications. "We can't turn them away without hearing them out. It goes against everything we fought for." Altair nodded reluctantly. "I agree, but we must proceed with caution." Hours later, Scott and Altair stood in the docking bay as the Zyraxian ship eased into position. The atmosphere was tense, with both human and Ocampa security forces on high alert. The ship's hatch opened with a hiss of escaping air. A group of Zyraxians emerged, their posture submissive, antennae drooping. Their spokesperson, a smaller Zyraxian with intricate markings, stepped forward. "I am Zix," the alien said, its voice a series of clicks and whistles translated by their systems. "We come seeking sanctuary. Our opposition to the war has made us outcasts among our own people." Scott exchanged a glance with Altair before addressing the refugees. "We're willing to hear you out, Zix, but you must understand our caution." As the refugees were escorted to secure quarters, Scott's mind raced with possibilities. An idea began to form, bold and potentially revolutionary. Later in Altair's private chambers, Scott paced as he outlined his plan. What if we created a joint colony? Humans, Ocampans, and these Zyraxian refugees, all working together to build something new. Altair's eyes widened. "That's ambitious and risky." "Exactly," Scott said, his excitement growing. "It's a chance to show the galaxy what cooperation can achieve. We could call it New Harmony." Altair considered for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It won't be easy, but I see the potential." "Very well, I'll support this initiative." The establishment of New Harmony became Scott's primary focus over the next several months. He coordinated with terraforming teams to prepare a suitable planet, negotiated with various factions to secure resources, and worked tirelessly to address the concerns of all involved parties. Altair, meanwhile, threw herself into designing the colony's security systems. The force field technology that had proven so crucial in the war now found new applications, creating safe zones where different species could interact without fear. As the first colonists began to arrive on New Harmony, Scott stood on a hill overlooking the fledgling settlement. Prefab structures dotted the landscape, with more permanent buildings slowly taking shape. He watched as a human construction crew worked alongside Ocampan engineers and Xeraxian laborers, the sight filling him with hope. Altair joined him, her expression a mix of pride and concern. "It's remarkable," she said softly, "but we're not out of the woods yet." Scott nodded, understanding her caution. "There's still so much to do. We need to establish trade routes, set up a governing council, create educational programs." His thoughts were interrupted by the crackle of his communicator. "Commander Wright," a voice called out urgently, "we have a situation in the marketplace. A dispute over resource allocation has turned violent." Scott and Altair exchanged a grim look before rushing to the scene. They arrived to find a tense standoff between a group of humans and Xeraxians, with Ocampan peacekeepers trying to maintain order. "What's going on here?" Scott demanded, stepping between the two groups. A human colonist, his face flushed with anger, pointed at the Xeraxians. "They're hoarding the best farmland. We need that land to grow crops that humans can eat." The Xeraxian spokesperson chittered indignantly. "We require specific soil conditions for our nutritional needs. The land we've chosen is barely adequate as it is." Scott raised his hands, calling for calm. "Listen, everyone. We're all in this together. We need to find a solution that works for everyone." Over the next few hours, Scott mediated the dispute, drawing on all his diplomatic skills. He proposed a rotating system of land use, combined with shared greenhouse facilities that could accommodate the needs of all species. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As the crowd dispersed, Altair approached Scott. "You handled that well," she said, a note of admiration in her voice. "But it's clear we have more challenges ahead than we anticipated." Scott nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "We're asking people who were enemies mere months ago to become neighbors and colleagues. It won't be easy, but I believe it's worth the effort." Their conversation was cut short by an incoming transmission from Earth. Admiral Chen's face appeared on Scott's communicator, her expression grave. "Right, we need you back on Earth immediately," she said without preamble. "There's growing resistance to the Alliance here. Anti-alien sentiment is on the rise, and we need you to help counter it." Scott's heart sank. He looked at Altair, seeing his own concern mirrored in her eyes. "I have to go," he said softly. Altair nodded, her posture straightening. "And I must return to Ocampa Prime. My own people are struggling with these changes. We both have work to do." As they prepared for their respective journeys, Scott and Altair stood together one last time on New Harmony soil. The colony stretched out before them, a living testament to their shared vision. "We'll stay in touch," Scott said, reaching out to activate his personal force field. Altair did the same, and they embraced, the fields merging to allow contact while still providing a comforting barrier. "Be safe," Altair whispered, "and remember, what we're building here is bigger than any one world or species." As Scott boarded the shuttle that would take him back to Earth, he couldn't shake the feeling that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The colony, their alliance, and their own relationship would all be tested in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The shuttle lifted off, carrying Scott towards an uncertain future. As New Harmony shrank beneath him, he steeled himself for the battles to come, not with weapons, but with words and ideas. The war might be over, but the real work of building a lasting peace was just beginning. Scott's shuttle docked with the Earth orbital station, his mind still on New Harmony and the challenges that lay ahead. As he made his way through the bustling corridors, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The tension in the air was palpable, and he caught snippets of worried conversations as he passed by. Admiral Chen was waiting for him in the command center, her face grim. "Commander Wright, we have a situation." Before she could continue, alarms blared throughout the station. Red warning lights bathed the room in an eerie glow. "What's happening?" Scott demanded, his body tensing for action. Chen's fingers flew over the holographic display, bringing up a series of sensor readings. "We've detected an unknown fleet entering the system. They're unlike anything we've seen before." Scott's blood ran cold as he studied the data. The ships were massive, their designs organic and alien. "The Vorax," he whispered. Chen looked at him sharply. "You know what these are?" Scott nodded, his mind racing. "We've had intelligence reports, but we never expected them to reach Earth so quickly. Over the next few hours, Scott found himself in a whirlwind of emergency meetings and strategic planning sessions. He shared everything he knew about the Vorax threat, drawing on the information gathered during his time on New Harmony. As he worked with Earth's military leaders, Scott couldn't help but think of Altair. He needed her strategic insight, her calm presence in the face of crisis. He opened a secure channel to New Harmony, relieved when Altair's face appeared on the screen. "Scott," she said, her eyes widening as she took in his expression. "What's wrong?" He quickly briefed her on the situation. Altair's face grew grave as she listened. "This changes everything," she said. "We need to accelerate our plans for New Harmony's defenses." Scott nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "We need to protect both Earth and New Harmony. But how?" Altair's eyes gleamed with drive. "I have an idea. It's risky, but it might be our best chance." Over the next few weeks, Scott and Altair worked tirelessly to implement their plan. They established a unified command structure, integrating human, Ocampa, and Xeraxian military forces. It wasn't easy. Centuries of mistrust and cultural differences led to frequent clashes. But the looming Vorax threat provided a powerful incentive for cooperation. On New Harmony, Altair oversaw the construction of advanced defense systems. The centerpiece was a massive planetary shield, an ambitious project that expanded the personal force field technology to a global scale. Scott watched in awe as the shield took shape, a shimmering dome that encompassed the entire colony. "It's incredible," he said, standing beside Altair as they observed the final calibrations. She nodded, her expression a mix of pride and concern. "But it's untested against Vorax weapons. We can't rely on it alone." Scott agreed. He turned his attention to developing new combat tactics, drawing on the unique strengths of each species in their alliance: human adaptability, Ocampa psychic abilities, and Xeraxian physical prowess. Combined, they formed a formidable fighting force. As preparations continued, Scott received troubling reports from Altair. A faction of Xeraxian refugees, led by a charismatic figure named Vexcar, was advocating for a preemptive strike against the Vorax. "They're afraid," Altair explained during one of their nightly strategy sessions. "Vexcar is playing on their fears, telling them we're not doing enough to protect them." Scott frowned, recognizing the danger of internal division. "We need to address their concerns head-on. Can you arrange a meeting with Vexcar?" The meeting was tense, with Vexcar's supporters filling the chamber with angry chittering. Scott listened to their grievances, then laid out the alliance's defense plans in detail. He emphasized the need for unity and cooperation. "A preemptive strike would only alert the Vorax to our capabilities," Scott argued. "Our best chance is to be prepared and strike when the moment is right." Vexcar's antennae twitched skeptically, but Scott could see doubt creeping into the eyes of his supporters. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. The situation escalated dramatically when long-range sensors detected a Vorax scout ship breaching the outer defenses of the solar system. Scott and Altair led a joint strike team to intercept the vessel, their newly integrated forces facing their first real test. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Scott's innovative tactics proved effective, but the Vorax technology was like nothing they'd ever encountered. Their ships seemed to adapt and heal in real time, making them difficult to damage. "We need to board that ship," Scott shouted over the comm channel. "It's our best chance to gather intel." Altair's voice crackled back, tense but determined. "Agreed. I'm moving into position now." Scott watched in awe as Altair's ship executed a series of impossible maneuvers, drawing the Vorax vessel's fire. It gave Scott the opening he needed. He led a small team onto the alien ship, his heart pounding as they breached the hull. Inside, they encountered the Vorax for the first time. The aliens were insectoid, with multiple limbs and exoskeletons that seemed to blur the line between organic and mechanical. Their movements were unnaturally fast, their attacks coordinated with hive-like precision. Scott's team fought their way through the ship, relying on their force field technology to repel the Vorax's strange weaponry. They managed to capture a Vorax drone, securing it in a containment field. As they prepared to retreat, disaster struck. The captured Vorax began to convulse, its body glowing with an eerie light. Scott realized what was happening, a split second before it occurred. "It's going to self-destruct," he yelled. "Everyone out now!" The explosion rocked the ship, sending Scott flying. He felt a searing pain in his side as shrapnel tore through his suit. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Altair's face, her eyes wide with fear as she dragged him to safety. Scott drifted in and out of consciousness, catching glimpses of medbays and concerned faces. When he finally awoke fully, he found Altair at his bedside, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You had us worried." Scott tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in his side. "The Vorax, what happened?" Altair's expression darkened. "The scout ship was destroyed, but not before it sent a signal. We intercepted part of it. The main Vorax fleet is on its way, Scott. We're out of time." As Scott recovered, Altair took charge of the colony's defenses. She implemented a series of combat simulations, pushing their integrated forces to their limits. Scott watched the exercises from his hospital bed, his mind racing with new ideas. One night, as Altair reviewed the latest simulation results, Scott sat up suddenly, ignoring the protest from his healing wounds. "I've got it," he said, his eyes shining with excitement. "We need to take the force field technology to the next level, direct neural interfaces between pilots and their ships." Altair's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. "It's risky," she said slowly, "but it might be our best chance against the Vorax's adaptive technology." As they worked to implement the new system, an urgent transmission came in from Earth. The Vorax had launched their first major assault on human colonies in the outer solar system. The Alliance now faced an impossible choice: defend Earth or concentrate on fortifying New Harmony. Scott and Altair stood on the command deck of their flagship, watching as the first waves of the Vorax armada appeared on the long-range sensors. The weight of two worlds rested on their shoulders, and the true test of their leadership and their bond was about to begin. The massive Vorax ships loomed on the horizon, their organic forms pulsing with an eerie alien energy. Scott and Altair exchanged a glance, years of shared experiences and unspoken trust passing between them in an instant. "We can't just sit back and wait for them to attack," Scott said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to take the fight to them." Altair nodded, her eyes gleaming with fierce purpose. "Agreed. A preemptive strike is our best chance, but we can't leave New Harmony undefended." They quickly formulated a plan. Scott would remain to coordinate Earth's defense, while Altair would lead the assault on the Vorax fleet. As they prepared to part ways, Scott grabbed Altair's hand, their personal force fields merging to allow contact. "Be careful out there," he said softly. Altair squeezed his hand. "You too. Don't do anything foolish while I'm gone." As Altair's ship launched towards the Vorax armada, Scott turned his attention to implementing the neural interface technology. In the command center, technicians worked feverishly to link human pilots with their ships. Scott watched as the first test flights launched, the pilots' movements unnaturally smooth and precise. "It's working," one of the technicians reported, her voice filled with awe. "Reaction times are off the charts." Scott allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before refocusing on the task at hand. "Get every available pilot fitted with the interface. We need to be ready when the Vorax reach Earth." The planetary shield hummed to life, a shimmering dome of energy enveloping the planet. As the first wave of Vorax ships entered range, Scott held his breath, watching the shield's power readings closely. The alien energy weapons impacted the barrier in a dazzling display of light and sound, but the shield held. "Shield integrity at 98%, a technician reported. "It's working." Scott nodded grimly. "For now, but they'll adapt. We need to press our advantage while we have it." He opened a channel to the neural interface pilots. "All squadrons, engage the enemy. Focus on their weapon systems and propulsion. Let's see how they like fighting blind and crippled." The battle for Earth began in earnest, human ships darting between the massive Vorax vessels with impossible agility. Scott coordinated the defense from the command center, his mind racing to stay one step ahead of the alien tactics. Meanwhile, light years away, Altair led her strike team towards the Vorax command ship. Her vessel, a sleek hybrid of human and Ocampa technology, slipped past the outer defenses using advanced stealth systems. "Prepare for boarding," Altair commanded, her voice steady despite the tension thrumming through her body. "Remember your training. These aren't like any enemy we've faced before." The strike team breached the Vorax ship's hull, personal force fields flickering to life as they entered the alien environment. The interior was a nightmarish blend of organic and mechanical elements, pulsing and shifting as if alive. Altair led the way, her Ocampa senses on high alert. They encountered the first wave of Vorax drones in a cavernous chamber that seemed to serve as a central hub. The insectoid creatures moved with unnatural speed and precision, their attacks coordinated by some unseen intelligence. "Form up!" Altair shouted, her personal force field deflecting a barrage of strange organic projectiles. "Don't let them flank us!" The team fought their way deeper into the ship, human special forces and Ocampa warriors working in perfect synergy. Altair's strategy proved effective, but the cost was high. With each chamber they cleared, their numbers dwindled. Back on Earth, Scott received an urgent transmission from New Harmony. His blood ran cold as he saw Zara's face, her expression grim. "Scott, we have a situation," she said, her voice tight with tension. "Vexcar has staged a coup. He and his followers have taken control of the colony's main defense systems." Scott's mind raced, calculating the potential impact on their overall strategy. "Can you handle it?" he asked, knowing how thin their resources were already stretched. Zara nodded firmly. "I've assembled a team. We'll retake control of the defenses. Just be ready for anything." As Scott turned his attention back to Earth's defense, he felt the weight of command pressing down on him. The fate of two worlds now hung in the balance, with threats both external and internal. The neural interface pilots continued to hold their own against the Vorax, but Scott could see the aliens adapting, their attacks becoming more focused and effective. Several outlying colonies reported heavy damage, and the planetary shield's power levels were dropping steadily. "Reroute power from non-essential systems," Scott ordered. "We need to keep that shield up at all costs." On New Harmony, Zara led her team through the colony's winding corridors, using her intimate knowledge of Ocampa technology to bypass Vexcar's safeguards. They reached the control center, finding it heavily guarded by Zaraxian rebels. "Vexcar!" Zara called out, her voice carrying the authority of her position and heritage. "This madness must end. We cannot hope to survive if we turn against each other." The Zaraxian leader emerged from behind his guards, his antennae twitching with agitation. "You don't understand," he chittered. "I've seen what the Vorax do to conquered worlds. We cannot risk assimilation." Zara stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I understand your fear, Vexcar, but this is not the way. Unity is our only hope for survival." As Zara worked to reason with the Zaraxian rebels, her team slowly maneuvered into position, ready to act if negotiations failed. Light years away, Altair's strike team finally reached the central chamber of the Vorax command ship. What they found there defied explanation, a massive, pulsating organic structure that seemed to be equal parts brain and computer. "This is it," Altair breathed, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and revulsion. The Vorax hive mind. But before they could act, elite Vorax guards swarmed into the chamber, their forms more evolved and deadly than the drones they had faced before. Automated defense systems sprang to life, filling the air with deadly energy pulses. Altair's team fought desperately, their numbers dwindling with each passing moment. A vast chasm of writhing Vorax biomatter separated them from the central node. In a moment of clarity, Altair saw their one chance for victory and the likely cost. She turned to her remaining team members, her expression resolute. "Cover me," she ordered. Then, taking a deep breath, she activated her personal force field in a way it was never designed to be used. The energy field expanded, forming a shimmering bridge across the chasm. Altair sprinted across, the field flickering and destabilizing with each step. She reached the central node just as her force field failed completely, leaving her exposed to the Vorax defenses. With no time to hesitate, Altair began the destruction sequence. As she worked, she realized the terrible truth. The electromagnetic pulse that would destroy the hive mind would also likely disable her team's life support systems. For a brief moment, Altair's hand hovered over the final command. She thought of Scott, of the future they had dreamed of building together. Then, setting her jaw, she initiated the sequence. The Vorax hive mind erupted in a blinding flash of energy. Across the battlefield, Vorax ships suddenly lost cohesion, their attacks becoming erratic and unfocused. On Earth, Scott saw the change immediately. "This is our chance," he shouted, rallying the human forces for a counteroffensive. "Push them back!" But as the tide of battle turned, Scott's moment of triumph was cut short by a chilling realization. All communication with Altair's team had been lost. As Earth's forces began to push back the Vorax fleet, Scott found himself facing an impossible choice. Should he lead the final assault against the retreating aliens, potentially ending the war once and for all? Or should he mount a desperate rescue mission to the Vorax command ship, risking everything on the slim chance that Altair and her team had survived? The weight of command pressed down on Scott as he stood in the eerily quiet command center, the fate of two worlds and the woman he loved hanging on his decision. The fate of humanity and its allies hung in the balance, and every second counted. "All ships, this is Admiral Scott," he announced, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "Prepare for a full-scale offensive against the Vorax fleet. We have a chance to end this war, and we're going to take it." As the orders were relayed, Scott felt a pang of guilt. He was choosing the greater good over his personal desires, potentially sacrificing Altair and her team in the process. But he knew it was the right call. The combined forces of Earth, Ocampa, and the Zyraxian refugees mobilized with unprecedented speed. Neural interface pilots led the charge, their movements fluid and precise as they weaved through the disorganized Vorax ships. Scott watched the tactical displays, coordinating the assault with a mix of tenacity and calculated precision. Human ingenuity, Ocampa technology, and Zyraxian ferocity combined into a formidable fighting force. "Squadron Delta, flank the Vorax cruiser on Vector 279, Scott ordered. "Ocampa frigates, focus your energy weapons on their propulsion systems." The battle unfolded like a deadly dance, with the Allied forces pressing their advantage against the confused Vorax. Without their hive mind to coordinate their actions, the alien ships moved erratically, their attacks unfocused and easily countered. As Scott prepared to issue another set of orders, an urgent transmission cut through the comm chatter. His heart nearly stopped as Altair's face appeared on the screen, her features strained and barely visible through static. "Scott? We're alive," she gasped, her voice weak but determined. "Emergency life support. Holding off drones. Need extraction." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving Scott momentarily frozen. She was alive, but for how long? "Zara," Scott called, his mind racing. "Assemble a rescue team immediately. I'm sending you the coordinates of the Vorax command ship." As Zara acknowledged the order and began preparations, Scott refocused on the main battle. He couldn't afford to let his personal feelings compromise the offensive. "All ships, maintain pressure on the Vorax fleet," he commanded. "We're going to try something new. Planetary shield generators, prepare to create localized force fields on my mark." The innovative tactic took the Vorax by surprise. Shimmering bubbles of energy enveloped enemy ships, effectively neutralizing them without destruction. It was a display of power and restraint that left even the human forces in awe. Meanwhile, Zara led her rescue team towards the massive Vorax command ship. Their sleek vessels, equipped with the latest stealth technology, slipped past the remaining Vorax defenses. "Remember, we're likely to encounter active internal defenses and residual drone activity," Zara briefed her team as they prepared to board. "Stay alert and keep your force fields at maximum strength." The rescue team breached the hull of the command ship, immediately encountering the nightmarish fusion of organic and mechanical elements that characterized Vorax architecture. The corridors pulsed with an eerie bioluminescent glow, and the air was thick with an acrid alien scent. Zara led the way, her Ocampa senses on high alert as they navigated the twisting passageways. They encountered pockets of resistance, confused Vorax drones that attacked with uncoordinated ferocity. The team's advanced force field technology proved invaluable, deflecting energy blasts and organic projectiles alike. As they pushed deeper into the ship, they faced increasingly deadly challenges. Automated defense systems sprang to life, filling corridors with beams of searing energy. Biohazardous spores erupted from hidden vents, testing the limits of their protective gear. "Stay together," Zara ordered as they cleared another chamber filled with the bodies of fallen Vorax. "We're getting close to Altair's last known position." Back on Earth, the tide of battle had turned decisively in humanity's favor. The planetary shield, though strained by repeated attacks, held firm against the Vorax's increasingly desperate assaults. Scott's innovative use of force field technology, combined with the precision of the neural interface pilots, had broken the back of the alien invasion. As reports of victory began to pour in from around the globe, Scott allowed himself a moment of relief, but his thoughts quickly returned to Altair and the rescue mission. On the Vorax command ship, Zara's team finally reached the chamber, where Altair and her surviving team members had made their last stand. The scene that greeted them was one of carnage and desperation. The floor was littered with the bodies of Vorax drones, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of weapons fire. In the center of the chamber, behind a hastily constructed barricade, they found Altair. She was barely conscious, her body battered and her force field flickering weakly. Around her, the few surviving members of her strike team maintained a vigilant guard, their weapons trained on the chamber's entrance. "Altair," Zara called out, her voice filled with a mix of relief and concern. "We're here to get you out." Altair's eyes fluttered open, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Took you long enough," she murmured, her voice weak but still carrying a hint of her characteristic dry humor. As the rescue team worked to stabilize Altair and the other survivors, Scott received word of their success. The relief that washed over him was palpable, but he knew the fight wasn't over yet. "All ships, this is Admiral Scott," he announced, his voice carrying a new strength. "The Vorax command ship has been secured. Let's finish this." The final push against the remaining Vorax forces was swift and decisive. Without their command structure and faced with humanity's newest technological advancements, the alien fleet crumbled. Ships were disabled or destroyed in rapid succession, their once fearsome armada reduced to floating debris. As the last Vorax vessel fell silent, a profound quiet settled over the battlefield. Then slowly at first, but quickly building, cheers erupted across every channel. Humanity, against impossible odds, had prevailed. But even as the celebrations began, Scott's mind was already turning to the challenges ahead. The captured Vorax command ship represented a treasure trove of advanced technology and biological samples. He immediately called for a team of scientists from all three allied species to begin studying the alien tech. "We need to understand their technology," Scott instructed the assembled team of human, Ocampa, and Xeraxian scientists. "Not just to defend against it, but to see if we can adapt it for our own use. The hive mind, in particular, could hold the key to advancements we can't even imagine." As the scientific teams began their work, Scott turned his attention to the monumental task of reconstruction. The war had left deep scars on both Earth and New Harmony. Colonies lay in ruins, infrastructure had been decimated, and countless lives had been lost. "We need a comprehensive rebuilding plan," Scott announced to his advisors. "One that integrates the strengths of all our peoples. Human innovation, Ocampa technology, Xeraxian labor, working together, we can create something stronger than what we lost." But even as he outlined his vision for reconstruction, Scott's thoughts kept returning to Altair. She had been rushed to the most advanced medical facility on New Harmony, her condition critical. The medical team, composed of the finest doctors from all three species, worked tirelessly to save her life. Scott stood at her bedside, watching anxiously as she underwent a series of complex procedures. The steady beep of monitoring equipment filled the room, each sound a reminder of how precarious her situation remained. As he waited, Scott found himself reflecting on the events that had brought them to this point. The alliance they had forged, the battles they had fought, the impossible odds they had overcome. It all seemed to pale in comparison to the fight Altair now faced. Suddenly, the monitors began to show signs of improvement. Altair's vital signs started to stabilize, her body responding to the treatments. Scott felt a surge of hope, tempered by the knowledge that they still had a long road ahead. As he watched Altair's chest rise and fall with each breath, Scott realized that the end of the Vorax War wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of a new chapter. For him, for Altair, for the Alliance, and for the entire galaxy. The future stretched out before them, filled with both promise and uncertainty. Outside the medical facility, the first diplomatic envoys from other alien races were already arriving, drawn by news of the Alliance's victory over the Vorax. Scott knew that these new interactions would bring both opportunities and challenges. The galaxy was watching, and the actions they took now would shape the course of history. With one last look at Altair's sleeping form, Scott straightened his uniform and prepared to face whatever came next. The war might be over, but their journey was far from finished. Scott's eyes never left Altair's face as she lay motionless in the medical bay. The rhythmic beeping of monitors provided a constant reminder of her precarious condition. A team of doctors, human, Ocampa, and Xeraxian, moved around her with practiced efficiency, their hands steady as they worked with unfamiliar hybrid technologies. Days passed in a blur of anxiety and hope. Scott found himself dozing in his chair, jerking awake at every change in the monitor's tempo. On the fourth day, as the first light of New Harmony's twin suns filtered through the windows, Altair's eyelids fluttered open. Her gaze, initially unfocused, locked onto Scott's face. A weak smile tugged at her lips. "You look terrible," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Scott leaned forward, his heart pounding. "You're one to talk," he replied, clasping her hand gently. As Altair's recovery progressed, Scott divided his time between her bedside and the monumental task of rebuilding. He pored over reports in Altair's room, discussing plans between her treatments and rest periods. "We're repurposing Vorax biotech for environmental restoration," he explained, showing her holographic projections of devastated landscapes slowly coming back to life. "Their organic circuitry, once we cracked it, is incredibly efficient at purifying soil and water." Altair nodded, her strength visibly returning with each passing day. Impressive, from weapons of destruction to tools of renewal. Weeks later, as Altair took her first steps outside the medical facility, Scott proposed a bold new initiative. "We need to reach out, show the galaxy what we've achieved here. I'm thinking a diplomatic tour." Altair's eyes lit up with excitement. "Count me in!" Their journey across the stars became a testament to the power of unity. On world after world, they shared their story, not just of victory against the Vorax, but of the bonds forged in the crucible of war. On the crystalline plains of Azura, Scott addressed a gathering of bioluminescent beings. "Our strength lies not in our differences, but in how we bridge them," he said, as Altair demonstrated the personal force field technology that allowed safe interaction between species. In the floating cities of Viridian, Altair spoke of resilience to a race of avian scholars. "Adversity taught us to adapt, to find common ground where none seemed possible," she explained, as Scott showcased holographic models of their integrated colonies. Their greatest challenge came on Krill, a world of perpetual twilight inhabited by a deeply isolationist species. The Krill, chitinous beings with multifaceted eyes, regarded the Alliance with open suspicion. In a tense meeting hall, Scott made his bold proposal. "We invite you to experience our way of life firsthand. I will stay here on Krill, while you send representatives to New Harmony." The Krill Arbiter's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation or interest. Scott wasn't sure. "You would willingly isolate yourself among us." "Not isolation," Scott corrected. "An opportunity for mutual understanding." The exchange proved transformative. Scott immersed himself in Krill culture, learning their complex system of pheromone-based communication. Meanwhile, on New Harmony, Altair guided the Krill representatives through bustling streets where humans, Ocampas, and Xeraxians coexisted harmoniously. When Scott returned to New Harmony, he found a changed world. The skyline had evolved, incorporating elements of architecture from a dozen worlds. In the central plaza, a monument depicting intertwined humanoid figures of various species stood as a symbol of their growing alliance. One evening, as they watched the twin suns set from a balcony overlooking the city, Scott turned to Altair. He produced a small box containing 2 rings, each embedded with a miniature force field generator. "Altair," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you—" "Yes," she interrupted, her eyes shining. "1,000 times, yes." Their wedding became a galactic sensation. The ceremony blended traditions from across known space. Scott wore ceremonial Zyraxian armor over his dress uniform, while Altair was resplendent in a gown that shimmered with Ocampa bioluminescence. They exchanged vows in multiple languages, their words echoing across planets light-years apart via quantum entanglement transmitters. As years passed, their family grew. The birth of their twins, a boy with Scott's eyes and a girl with Altair's silver hair, was celebrated as a miracle of science and a symbol of unity. The children, named Zara and Talon, grew up in a world where interspecies cooperation was the norm. On the 10th anniversary of the Vorax defeat, New Harmony hosted a grand celebration. The city was transformed into a vibrant tapestry of cultures from hundreds of worlds. Former enemies stood side by side, sharing stories and forging new alliances. Scott and Altair took the stage together, their hands clasped. "A decade ago, we faced extinction," Scott began. "Today, we stand at the dawn of a new era of exploration and understanding," Altair continued. Together, they announced their decision to step down from active leadership. "It's time for new voices, new perspectives," Scott explained. As they left the stage, a thunderous applause followed them. In the privacy of a quiet garden, they embraced, their personal force fields humming in perfect harmony. "What now?" Altair asked, a glint of excitement in her eyes. Scott smiled, looking up at the star-filled sky. "Now, we explore. There's still so much out there to discover." Hand in hand, they walked towards their future, ready for whatever the vast expanse of space might bring.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.